President Lacalle Pou stated that the first doses of the Sinovac vaccine produced in China will arrive in Uruguay on February 25th. Seventh night of protest in Barcelona over the arrest of rapper Pablo Hasel. Ayatollah Khamenei stressed that Iran will continue to develop its nuclear power capabilities in line with its needs. Hello, welcome to From the Zones. I am Jorge Gomez from teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. President of Uruguay, Luis Lacalle Pou, stated that the first doses of the Sinovac vaccine against COVID-19 produced by China's Sinovac company will arrive in the country on February 25th.
On the night of the 25th and into the morning of the 26th, a shipment of 192,000 doses of the Sinovac vaccine will arrive. That will be complemented from March 15th with another 1,558,000 doses of the Chinese vaccine. And in the week of March the 8th through the week of April 26th, we will receive around 460,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine before completing the total of 2 million doses from the United States laboratory.
Members of the states of the Bolivarian Alliance for Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty have initiated a debate on education and times of pandemic. The video conference is attended by the ministers of education of member countries. The purpose of the meeting is to design strategies to guarantee the education at all levels in the midst of the ongoing pandemic. Secretary General of the ABA-TCP, Sacha Llorente, stated that the meeting is part of the actions undertaken by the multilateral organization to guarantee the continuity of social and economic programs aimed at promoting the development of ABA countries.
Today we have the opportunity to follow up with the plan approved by our head of the state and government at the last summit on December 14. The post-pandemic plan, a work plan that has among its most important points the relaunching of the social agenda of ALBA-TCP to revitalize its work and dependent model of collective solidarity and popular social development.
Speaking during the ALBA-TCP meeting, Venezuelan Education Minister Pablo Hasel reported that his government had held seminars with the support of international organizations to learn about the teaching models applied by other countries in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
During this period, seminars were held with the participation of UNICEF and UNESCO, with the invitation of some sister nations to study comparative education. 3 important seminars can be highlighted. One on distance education. Here we have the conclusion of that seminar that we can share with everyone. Another important seminar was educational television. We also gathered the conclusions and lessons and its link to the psychosocial and social-emotional impact of quarantine on our children. We close the year, as always, undertaking the experience of the National Pedagogical Congress, a congress that we are developing throughout the year to systematize the experiences in distance education.
This Monday, Bolivian President Luis Arce announced that Boeing 767 belonging to the state airline was on its way to China to receive a shipment of 500,000 doses of vaccine produced by China's Sinopharm pharmaceutical company. President Arce thanked his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping for his support to fighting the pandemic. China agreed to sell Bolivia 400,000 doses of the vaccine and donated another 100,000. Authorities have also signed deals for the supply of Russia's Sputnik V vaccine and the AstraZeneca shot. Nicaragua saw an official ceremony to commemorate the 87th anniversary of the assassination of the General Augusto César Sandino this Monday, attended by President Daniel Ortega, Vice President Rosario Murillo, and members of the governments. The Nicaraguan executive honored General Sandino at the monument to him located in Loma de Tizcapa. Augusto Sandino led the resistance against the U.S. occupation between 1927 and 1933. The struggle succeeded in pushing U.S. troops out of the country and securing Nicaragua's sovereignty. After recalling the events surrounding the assassination of General Sandino, President Ortega stressed the duty to remember the country's history.
But history cannot be forgotten, must not be forgotten, precisely because unfortunately these stories repeat themselves, and repeat themselves as long as we have imperialist powers in the world. Especially, we have this major imperialist power, which is the United States of America.
In the March anniversary of General Sandino's assassination, President Ortega called for an anti-imperialist hostilities against Venezuela and Cuba and for the lifting sanctions against these sister nations.
We say to you, Nicolas, brother, comrade, and we say to Chavez, who is with us in these battles, and we say to Bolivar, who goes forward with the sword, that the people of Nicaragua remain firm and will remain firm in their support, in its solidarity with the people and the government of Venezuela, and that we will not cease to cry out as we did in all the conferences that could be held, to cry out and demand that the sanctions against Venezuela cease, and that the sanctions against the sister nation of Cuba, the people of Fidel, the people of Raúl, cease.
We'll take a short break now. Welcome back. The seventh night of protest over the arrest of rapper Pablo Hasel occurred in Barcelona on Monday. The protests have been a nightly occurrence in the city since last Tuesday, when police forced their way into the Catalan University, where Hasel and his supporters were holed up to arrest him. In the nights that followed, police and protesters clashed repeatedly in the streets of Barcelona, Spain's second city and the capital of the northeast region of Catalonia. On the occasion of the high-level segment of the disarmament conference, Cuba urges the new U.S. administration to revoke the island's designation as a suspected state sponsor of terrorism. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez Parrilla denounced that last January 11, the government of former President Donald Trump designated Cuba as an alleged state sponsor of terrorism. The senior diplomat pointed out that the accusation is aimed at imposing additional obstacles to any prospect of progress in bilateral relations between the two countries, for which he urged the government of Joe Biden to revoke what he considered an absurd and unjustified decision. In addition, the head of Cuban diplomacy added that Cuba is asking the UN to fulfill its mandate to negotiate multilateral treaties on nuclear disarmament. Speaking at the 46th session of the UN Humanitarian Rights Council, Cuban Foreign Affairs Minister Bruno Rodriguez said that to achieve peaceful coexistence, unilateral coercive measures must end.
Peaceful coexistence among nations demands that the governments refrain from exerting pressure on others and from applying unjust unilateral coercive measures. In a cynical and hypocritical act, on January 11, 2021, the administration of President Donald Trump designated Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism to impose additional obstacles to any prospect of progress in bilateral relations between the two countries. We urge the new administration to revoke this absurd and unjustified decision.
The president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, mentioned the consequences of the unilateral coercive measures that the United States and its partners have imposed against his country.
Our homeland faces a multidimensional war The purpose is to end the social model built by the Bolivarian Revolution, the actions of exercise pressure and persecution against our country through the imposition of more than 450 unilateral and illegal coercive measures, which have resulted in a blockade and an obsessive persecution against the capacities of the Venezuelan state and society. By means of these so-called sanctions, Venezuela has been deprived of at least $30 billion in cash which belong to this country, although they are abroad. Those resources should and must be dedicated to the health services, food supply and rights of our people. The kidnappers of the assets and resources of the Venezuelan state have shown great cruelty, even in circumstances of pandemic, highlighting and disregarding the calls of the international community, the Secretary General of the United Nations, the High Commissioner, and especially the Venezuelan people, and they have increased the economic aggressions, causing an intentional and premeditated humanitarian crisis.
The Argentine Foreign Minister Felipe Carlos Solá called the international community to join in a national convention for the protection of all persons from enforced disappearance.
I take this opportunity to call on all the countries to adhere to the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. We have just launched, together with France, a new campaign to promote the universalization of this convention. The convention is a sign of the international community's commitment to strengthening the universal system of human rights protection. We hope to continue to contribute to these developments and also to work with the Human Rights Council, and in this context we hope to have the support of the states present for our candidacy for the period 2022-2024 in these elections that will soon take place.
Mexico's Undersecretary for Human Rights also stated that measures against COVID-19 must be adapted, taking into account the impact the virus has had on each gender.
Has promoted a vision in the United Nations General Assembly through a resolution that was co-sponsored by 179 states last April, as well as in different forums such as the G20, the World Health Organization, and this very council. The only effective response to the pandemic will be one that has a gender perspective, that understands and responds to the different ways in which the health crisis has affected women and girls. The pandemic has exacerbated pre-existing forms of violence and discrimination, which continue to be rooted in the patriarchal political, economic, and social systems.
In his address to the UN Human Rights Council, the Vietnamese Foreign Minister Pham Binh Minh stressed that the international community must work together and coordinate to neutralize the coronavirus on a global scale.
COVID-19 has left no country unharmed. All have been affected. No one can be safe until all others are. As an international community, we are all in the same boat. Therefore, international cooperation and solidarity are fundamental to help us overcome these challenges and to continue moving forward. Vietnam is very grateful for the valuable support from partners countries, international organizations, NGOs, and individuals around the world. Vietnam has provided medical masks and medical supplies to support more than 50 countries and international partners to assist in their response to the pandemic.
While addressing the UN Human Rights Council, Syria's Foreign Minister Faisal Mikdad accused the West of double standards and of using human rights as a pretext to intervene in other countries' internal affairs.
After 15 years since the establishment of this council, we regret that Western countries continue to use the platform of the council and its mechanism to impose an approach that is based on double standards and selectivity in dealing with human rights, and accusing states that are not in harmony with their political views and labeling them as being in violation of human rights, and using this as a pretext to interfere in their internal affairs. Unfortunately, some of those who have adopted decisions on Syria and other countries are among the governments that violate human rights the most. Those claiming that these measures do not affect ordinary citizens are lying, because coercive measures only affect ordinary citizens, impacting their basic needs. Unilateral coercive measures are among the clearest example of grave and systematic human rights violations that affect the peoples of the countries targeted through these illegal measures.
Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki called for the defense of fundamental rights during his address to the UN Human Rights Council. The Foreign Minister also made reference to the impact of the pandemic on the world.
We are convinced that you can act in favor of the dignity of human beings and the protection of human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, a year has passed. At that time we were here in the Human Rights Council headquarters. Today we are away, and yet we are united by the values of justice, equality, and human rights. And in that sense, I would like to express my condolences to all the people, to all the families who have lost loved ones due to the pandemic. This pandemic has taught us, reminded us, that we are human beings and equal, and that humanity is the most precious asset to defend.
We'll take a short break now. Welcome back. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei stressed that the country will continue to develop its nuclear power capabilities in line with its needs.
But we are determined to gain the nuclear capabilities in accordance with the country's needs, and there, Iran's enrichment limit will not be 20%, and we will act to the point that is needed and the country requires. Like for nuclear propellants and other works, we could bring enrichment to 60%.
White House Press Secretary James Saki reiterated this Monday that the Biden administration has opened talks with Iran.
First, I think you're referring to the reports from the IAEA over the weekend and kind of discussions they had about Iran's compliance and access that they would have or were looking to have to Iran's facilities on the ground. And certainly I would send you to them on that. But I would say that what Secretary Blinken's announcement and what our announcement that came out last week is a reflection of is an openness to have a conversation, an openness to diplomacy. And that invitation was issued by the Europeans to invite us, to invite the Iranians to the table to have a conversation. We have indicated, sent no indication that we are willing to take additional steps in advance of that. What we're willing to do is sit at a table and have a diplomatic conversation because we are looking to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, and we believe diplomacy is the best way to do that.
China's foreign minister made some remarks today about wanting to sort of rejig the relationship with the United States, and he called for tariffs to be removed. I know that this policy is under review along with lots of policies, but can you give any reaction to what he has said and any update on President Biden's feelings about tariffs and broader China policy?
Well, you know, I think as we said around the time when the president had a conversation with President Xi, we believe the relationship with China is one of strong competition. We want to come to that relationship from a position of strength. That means working in close coordination with our partners and allies around the world, Europeans, other partners in the region, also with Democrats and Republicans in Congress. And it also means we want to do work at home and focus on doing work at home to make sure we are coming to that from a position of strength. As you noted, there's of course a review of our tariffs and the tariffs that were put in place. I don't have any update on that at this point in time.
Sudan announced Sunday the reduction of its fixed exchange rate at the adoption of a managed currency load in line with an IMF program and amid an economic crisis that risks a fan an already smoldering popular discontent. This is the latest reform in a series of measures adopted by the joint civil-military government ruling the country. The move is one of several painful International Monetary Fund mandated reforms, which also include reducing costly subsidies aimed at securing that in relief and attracting investment. The measure is intended to curb a rampant black market that has caused the local pound to quadruple, with the official exchange rate was set at 55 pounds to the dollar. This rate is expected to move towards black market levels, pushing up prices even as citizens already face an inflation rate that exceeded 300% last month. Libyan authorities announced on Sunday that they had raided a secret prison in a southeastern city used by human traffickers and freed at least 156 African asylum seekers, including 15 women and 5 children. The Curve Security Bureau stated that the raid took place on February 16th after one man managed to escape a house turned prison and reported to authorities that he and other asylum seekers were held and tortured there by traffickers. Security forces arrested at least 6 traffickers and referred them to prosecutors for further investigation. The rescued asylum seekers, who were from Somalia, Eritrea, and Sudan, were taken to shelter where they were given food, clothes, and blankets. The head of the Community of Sahel-Saharan States Electoral Observation Mission in Niger has called on the candidate in Santos' presidential runoff to respect the results when they are published, as the body described the voting conditions to have been satisfactory.
The Community of Sahel-Saharan States Electoral Observation Mission noted that the second round of the presidential election of February 21, 2021 took place in accordance with the provisions of the Niger Electoral Code and in conditions satisfactory to all parties. The Community of Sahel-Saharan States Electoral Observation Mission urges all candidates to respect the results of the ballot boxes and to use legal channels and procedures for the settlement of any dispute relating to this election.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced that schools will reopen in England from March 8 and non-essential retail from April the 12th. Johnson informed Parliament of the measures, expressing hope regarding the return to normality by June. His government has imposed 3 stay-at-home orders since the beginning of the pandemic, but has been heavily criticized for its mishandling of the health crisis, which has cost more lives than in any other European nation. The Prime Minister also referred to the mass vaccination program across the country.
Step 4 will begin no earlier than the 21st of June. With appropriate mitigations, we will aim to remove all legal limits on social contact, and on weddings and other life events, we will reopen everything up to and including nightclubs and enable large events such as theatre performances above the limits of Step 3, potentially using testing to reduce the risk of infection.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories at our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For teleSUR English, I'm Ray Gomez, and thank you for watching.